Good evening. My name is Sheldon Scott, and I'm the Director of Culture here at Eaton, DC. And I want to thank you all for joining us on this Thursday evening. We are very excited here at Eaton to be hosting internationally renowned design collective Art Comes First for a residency. It's going to be about 10 days, and that residency has included a pop-up, the Electric Church, that's running from 7 to 10 p.m. Just about every night. A series of conversations. We started off with a film screening and had a conversation about fashion and race on Tuesday, and Sam and Chaka from Art Comes First were joined by Ouija from Brooklyn Circus, and we had designer Jamila Akubu and Jamal LeMay, a Stoneman Douglas graduate who is now studying at the New School and has been using fashion to push his cause to speak out against gun violence. Tonight we are going to be in conversation, punk ass, a conversation of race, masculinity, and fashion. And we will be joined in conversation tonight by internationally renowned and lauded author and writer Jason Reynolds. And moving forward, we will be back at some programming on Saturday, where we will have a all-day holiday bazaar downstairs in the Crystal Room from 11 to 8 p.m. A curated experience by Sam and Chaka, DC and DC area-based purveyors who have an aesthetic practice informed by social justice, sustainability, and we will also be having a conversation from 1 o'clock to 3 p.m. on that day. Shaka will be in conversation with Trey Taylor, the U.S. editor of The Face magazine. And The Face will be doing a film screening that afternoon from 4 to 6. And then in the evening, we will have Art Comes First working with Grown Folks Biz up in Wild Days, our rooftop. And they're going to be having a DJ party up there with those two groups and Baby Rose. And then Sunday, we're going to be having a going away and thank you party for Sam and Shaka for coming to DC and spending some time with us. We want to make sure that they are fully welcome and warm here in the District of Columbia and let them know that they're appreciated. And then that'll be it. We'll be sending them back. So without further ado, for this evening's programming, I would like to first bring up esteemed guest, Jason Reynolds. Let's welcome Jason to the stage.
Where's my seat?
Okay. Any way you like. Yes, sir. I'm going to let Jason and Sam and Shaka introduce themselves later on. And definitely our hosts for this evening, Sam and Chaka from Art Comes First.
Yo. I want your water.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. Keep that. All right, well, let's just start off with some introductions. Jason, why don't you share with the people who you are and why you're here?
I don't even know, bruh. I'm here because you invited me here. I'm Jason from here. I work as a novelist, mainly for young people. Most of my work actually focuses on ideas around masculinity and race, but also around just the everyday lives of our children for the most part. And I'm excited to be here. I mean, I've been a fan of these dudes for a long time, and it'll be cool for me to sort of be in conversation and chop it up. To hear where everybody is and how everybody feels about these issues that are so pertinent to our community.
Let's go down the line. Shaka?
Hi everyone. I'm Shaka Maido. I'm one half of Art Comes First, based out in London. Art Comes First is like a canopy of different things we do. So we wanted an outlet to be able to express ourselves. So Sam and I met Sam when I was probably 16, 20 years ago, and we formed this collective, which caters to styling, fashion, photography, so on and so forth. I'll let Sam do the rest talking.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Sam Lambert. I'm the other half of Outcome First. We are, what you can say, a worldwide art collective. We're both based in London and Paris, but we're based everywhere since we're Black Gypsies. So for now, we're based from DC, really. So yeah, that's all, really.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. So get the conversation started. I'll just share a little bit about this is one of the few times where I have joined a panel in the year or so since we've been here at Eaton, and I think what was so incredibly important for me is in kind of framing this kind of public dialogue. As an artist, my practice has always been informed by the concept of gender and gender performance. And, one of the kind of like consistent language or poetry, if you have it around my work, is as a performance-based artist, I am almost always dressed in a black suit with a white shirt and a black tie. And that choice and the intent around that is deeply informed by my experience growing up in the rural South as a little sissy boy, and having to process on a daily the construct of gender and my relation to it. And as a part of the work that I'm exploring, I was really interested in building in what I called respectability performance through fashion, and challenging a construct by donning something that is not necessarily related to me personally, but then serves a purpose in my practice as art. And I've always been investigating the idea of how, as Black men, we relate to fashion and how we access masculinity. And for me, the biggest part of the masculinity part was the masking, the part that came first. And, growing up, navigating the world and putting on what would sometimes be a uniform and going out into the world with the hopes that people will understand and embrace something about you with little investigation, only through the clothes that you have on your body. And I realized that that was not at all an effective mask very early on, that it was not a protector, it wasn't a shield, and it certainly was no superhero qualities to accessing fashion in that way. And now as a 43-year-old man, my relationship to fashion is definitely more rooted in what I feel, most personally comfortable with. And, theoretically, I feel like I only started wearing my own clothes within the last 10 years. And, 10 years ago, I was about 40 pounds lighter. So my clothes were a little bit tighter, but now got a little bit of weight on me, but I still can access, things that make me comfortable, not just physically, but socially and psychologically. And, when you think about collectives, like Art Comes First, and you look at the fashions and the expressions there, there's a conversation around manhood, masculinity, presentation, culture that happens regardless of anyone endowing it in that way. So having this conversation today, I think is real important for me cathartically, and I think also to posit in the public psyche, what goes into the idea, the freedom, and the self-determination that fashion can sometimes represent, and how that self-determination sometimes becomes, a damnation depending on where you are and what you are and who you are. So setting that framework, as moderator, maybe asking the panelists, what specific negotiations have you ever had in this conversation of race as it relates to what you wear and what you promote as a collective?
Easy question, guys. Go for it.
I love you already, Jason. I think I'll let you go first.
Yes, the collective. That would be you two. You know what I'm saying?
It's like, they say it's a canopy, and we all under the canopy now, Jason, so you're black, Jason.
Jason, you forgot one thing. We just cut a deal. You were part of the collection when we're sitting in that corner.
I heard it here first. All right, so I will say, okay, so Sheldon, so just so I make sure I get the question right. Can you say it one more time? 'Cause I want to make sure
what specific navigations have you had around fashion? And and Jason also has a history in fashion, as well too. Just to put context to it. But those specific navigations, as it relates to your race and in your perceived gender.
It's interesting. I think for me, when I really think about it all, I think. First of all, I think that so many of us are raised in environments where we feel like everything we wear has to, if it functions as nothing else, it at least has to function as, does this make me look whatever gay is? Mm-hmm. Right? So homophobia, at the core of this conversation probably has to be the idea of homophobia. Because I think that what stops so many black men from being sartorially free is the fear of being of homosexual assumption, which is a silliness, right? It's imagination, right? The same imagination, it's that famous quote, right? The most dangerous place for a black person in America is in the imaginations of white people, right? The same goes for homophobia within the black community, and that the most imprisoning and the most sort of oppressing thing, self-oppression. Is our fear or our attachment to homophobia, right? So when I'm young, so I think about sort of like I leave here when I'm 20, I move to New York. Eventually, I start working in clothing stores, and eventually I'm working in like Rag & Bone, when Rag & Bone was a brand new store, and it was young, and it was fresh, and it was fly still, and like all of that, right? And so I remember learning to pin and to tailor and to all these things that I'm watching happen now. And I'm thinking about, but I remember all of my clothes becoming thinner, slimmer and slimmer and slimmer and slimmer, right? Because my influences are changing. And I don't know if my clothes become slimmer if I don't see men in New York who I relate to as heterosexual with slim clothes, right? Because back then it was always like, yo, only Lenny Kravitz could do that. You got to be famous, right? You got to be famous to dress like that. You got to be a musician to dress like that. You got to be, right? There's all this other, if not, then people going to think you gay. And it's like, first of all, what's wrong with that, right? The first question is, what is wrong if someone thinks I'm gay? Why is gay a death curse? Why is gay poisonous? Why is gay all these other things, right? Which is the first question we all have to ask ourselves. Why is that such a bad thing that someone might assume that I'm gay? What does it matter to me? And what business of it is it my business anyway that someone else thinks that I might be gay? And me being afraid of that, what does that mean in response to all my gay friends who I claim to love so much? Right? How does that sort of strain the relationship with my homies and my friends who I've loved my whole life, who are openly gay and who I've claimed to be an ally and advocate for, right? And then lastly, you come to the realization like, yo, at the end of the day, if it's fly, it's fly. If it's what I want, it's what I want. And so you see this shift. I think about the same thing with like music, right? Jay-Z, all the cats that we sort of grew up on, and then the people that my brother grew up on, which they all wore tight clothes. Right, you figure if you talk about the 1980s, all of our rappers were dressed like this in the 1980s, and then you think about the 1990s when it becomes sort of the age of hypermasculinity and money and all the other things that sort of have become sort of popular culture, and you hear Jay-Z say, here's what we do and here's what we don't do, here's what we do and here's what we don't do, right? Making these calls, and you're like, yo, I could do all those things too, because Jay-Z said I could do it. He set the tone for those things, but really we could have been like, but Pharrell doing whatever he want, I could probably just do that. Right? But whoever was at the top and who we saw as the masthead for masculinity is who we all followed. And it's ultimately what I'm saying is it's all bogus and it's all silly. And I navigate it daily, but in order to do so, I have to come to grips with the fact that I've got to dismantle homophobia and I've got to dismantle misogyny. Because homophobia is also rooted in the idea of femininity. So what we're really saying, right, stereotypically, and so what we're really saying is when I'm afraid of being seen as homosexual, what I'm really afraid of being seen as is feminine. And so then the question becomes, well, what exactly is wrong with being feminine, right? All these other things are really at a macro level discussion. And once you get over those things, it's like, bro, these leopard boots is fly. So I'm gonna wear them because I like them, right? And end of story, you know what I mean? But it's a constant negotiation. It's like undoing anything else. It's a knot that's so thick and so rooted and so twisted, passed on from my parents, my grandparents, my friends, my community, and media, that to even attempt to undo it, it can be downright exhausting. Necessary, but can be downright exhausting. And you still slip into performance. You know?
Well, I think he said everything.
I told you I'd go first.
Next question.
Right now he's
You know what I
leading.
mean?
He's leading the collective.
I mean, I can relate because growing up in West London, skinny jeans was something that was common, so it wasn't a big deal. But getting into fashion, firstly, if you're from people from African background, you know, parents wanted you to be an academic. Like you have to be a doctor or a lawyer or one of those. So to take the route of, say, fashion was very feminine. Just because back home the seamstresses were mostly or predominantly women. So for a man to start stitching stuff was not a masculine thing to do. I studied computer science, so I used to escape after college and hang out with this bad boy here. I used to hang out with Sam, and because his father was a tailor, and his father taught him how to sew, and really, the reason I got into fashion, to be honest, was to impress women. I wanted to impress the young girls in my class. So I wanted to wear tight, nice clothes, but well-fitted clothes, and I couldn't afford them, so what I did was go to the vintage market, I'll buy vintage clothes, and Sam would help me stitch them. And then I'll impress the girls. But I remember the first time I ever changed my silhouette wearing tight jeans. The first people to attack me were actually a group of girls. And I was on the train, and the first question they asked, they saw me on the train sitting, and I thought they were checking me out, but they were really angry. And they approached me, and they're like, "Are you gay?" And I'm like, why do I have to be gay? And they're like, "Why are you wearing tight jeans? You must be a batty man," and so on and so forth. But that was my first experience, and that shocked me. And I was actually going on a date, and they kind of messed up my mood and actually ran back home to chill. I was going to change my clothes, and Sam is like, "You can't change your clothes. It means you're doing something right. If you actually got their attention that they got so vexed, you must be doing something right." Pretty much that rebellious stage, like, I felt like, okay, if people don't get it, that means I'm actually doing something right. Because I don't want to be like everyone else, and I don't want to dress like everyone else. Pretty much that's how we started Art Comes First, because like most of the time, when our friends would be like, "I don't get what you guys are doing," we look at each other and we shake our head and we push more. But to cut the story short, there's so many things. I think it's a lot of ignorance. Like when we were in Savvy Row, the suits were all modeled after a woman's silhouette. So those men dressing fly, thinking they're masculine, you actually, if you look at it technically, you actually dress like a woman. So, but it's like you said, it's the community and the ideas that have been implanted in us, and it takes a lot. It takes a lot. Just being even race, when we started what we're doing, there was just very few of us. And most of the time, again, if you're a black guy in fashion, you have to be gay. You know, and they had a box for every category you were in. Eventually, we realized, like, no matter what you do, people are always going to try to box you. So when we started Art Comfort, we're like, okay, you know what, we need to form our own identity, and we need to go against stuff like this. Like, our first collection, we shot it on a woman. Just because to show people, like, look, a stylistic person is a stylistic person. It's not about the clothes, it's about the person that's wearing it, and it's not about the sex. So at this stage in our career and how far we've gone, I would say the biggest challenge is really from our community. And it's a conscious decision that we've taken upon ourselves to make sure we educate and change these notions based on our collections.
I think Shaka said everything. No, I'm kidding. This is funny. I got 2 stories to tell, and obviously on the collective, I'm the one who talks a lot, but I'm gonna try to make it short. First of all, the idea of what we actually created, the collective, it was based on 2 ideas, which was very much punk thinking about it now, but it was never the intention to make it very punk. Rebellism and individualism, which we all have. Soon as you grow up with your siblings, first thing you want to do is rebel against your parent and look as different as you can to the rest of your siblings. Coming from a large family, African family, I have 9 siblings. So all my life, I always try not to look like them and try not to follow whatever they was trying to preach. But when I met this handsome rebel, everything changed. We realized it was these 2 against the rest of the people who were very, very close to us, but they wasn't really seeing a vision. So the idea was that we will express ourselves on every single thing we do. Nutrition, clothing, way of speaking, way of thinking. But the interesting part was when we started traveling abroad. So our first time in the States, I think it was 25 years ago. And even though we liked I wouldn't call it tight clothes, we have a normal size clothing, standard size. We decided to go to every single corner of where it was memorable for us for hip hop. So we went to Harlem, we went to 45th Street, we went to Church Avenue, and I remember like seeing all these beautiful black people around. Again, sorry, I stare quite a lot when I see beautiful black people, men or women. So we'd be staring at people like, wow, people here are so beautiful, so stylish. And I remember people stopping and looking at us in some kind of way, and they say some sort of homophobic things. And then we look at ourselves and we're like, what's going on? I was just wearing a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. But we didn't realize our size wasn't according to what they were wearing. But we never let that bother us. We carried with that thing, and then I remember going to Soho and sitting down for a coffee. The same thing happened, but it was the other way around. There they gave us compliment. And we're like, oh, wow. We're like, maybe some people meant to like it, some people not meant to like it. Again, we're carrying with our life. But the funny thing actually was, that wasn't even a big deal. We just thought, it's normal. We let people comment and say the things, but whatever they say, it could never really go through us, because again, it was that 2 things we always stood about, which was rebellism and individualism. So when we started doing the whole fashion thing, going to P2 Womo, to fashion shows and stuff, again, it was just these 2 weirdo black guys going back and forth to shows to show. And every picture the street style people took, it was these 2 characters, one short, one tall, both skinny. And we didn't realize what was telling to the rest of the world, but one day a Japanese customer set us down. Actually, no, I wasn't even there. I was someone else doing something else. And they asked Shaka, so where's Sam? Shaka goes, oh, Sam is somewhere with his girlfriend. And they go, what? Are you guys not together? Are you not gay? But the most beautiful thing is, Shaka didn't answer it. Because whatever comment people said about us, it was not for us to comment. That was your vision. So if for your vision we both are gay, fine. He's there dating a girl. But if you still thinking we're gay, fine. For the guy who saw me here looking at me, said a comment, I was fine with it, because I realized the rebellism and individualism, it was working. So the rest of things of adding on top, I was fine with it. So just then we realized we were very comfortable with ourselves. And then next thing you knew, I was in Jamaica wearing my booty shorts and having Jamaican guy calling me names. I didn't care, because I know, really, at the end of the day, I'm here. I exist.
Actually, he did that to provoke, actually.
Exactly.
No. My legs are really sexy, guys. I mean, seriously. I mean, look at them. I mean, come on. I might not be tall, but I got some sexy legs.
The short was actually long, and he cut it really short.
No.
He knew we were going to Jamaica, and I'm like, dude, I don't want attention. And
Sorry,
then
guys.
start walking on this.
So just to give you guys an idea, all right? Me and Sheldon, we have the same age. As an African, Shaka's a bit young, so I'm allowed to bully him, no? So I was born in the 70s. I like my 60s, 70s style. If everybody remembers the 70s or the 60s, when you look at your daddy's picture, how the shorts were? Here, right? So that's what I was wearing, you know? But the Rasta man didn't seem to like it. But either way, I still love them, Ja Rastafari.
So definitely there were some really interesting points that I think we'll just say kind of use to frame the conversation. We talked about self-determination, that came up a very big thing. And I think, like, you know, the context of self-determination, particularly, you know, for black people, for black men, you know, growing up in whatever environment that you grew up in, you know, the idea of self-determination is, you know, it's almost like a fleeting thought. And, you know, the first thing that you're probably looking to release yourself from is the confines and construct of the barrier that is race, you know, in your quest for self-determination. And like you go out and you self-determine, and like, you know, fashion then becomes a part of that. And, you know, the subsequent backlash and the, you know, the kind of consequences of that, I think it's a very interesting through line that we could talk about a little bit more. What you just mentioned, and I think, Shaka, you may have mentioned earlier, is like this idea of fashion and gender and how those things have changed over recent times. Because I tell people there's a very interesting and a very beautiful photo of Dr. Dre, I think back in the early 80s. And Dre is incredibly androgynous in this photo. I think he's wearing, it's like a red suit. He's got long Jerry curls. And, you know, when you think about it, like a lot of the inspiration at that time, Rick James, you know, George Clinton, you know, Lamont and Rollo from Sanford and Son. Rollo, who's my personal fashion inspiration. You know, Rollo never wear anything more than a size 29. Like, and that dude, you know, had it. And it was, you know, it was a beautiful thing to look at, and didn't have that construct. And obviously, I think what you mentioned with like hip hop and, you know, like going to Harlem and doing these things, I could imagine, you know, what the intensity was, because, you know, the conversation was hyper masculine at that time, and you're standing on the corner and, you know, you're not wearing like, you know, the baggy jeans and the, you know, the oversized t-shirt. Like that's definitely, it's a calling card. And I think the thing that was really interesting about like where we can start off right now is the definition or the constriction that is fashion and gender. Like I have not noticed any of the things that you sell and you produce being designated in that binary fashion, being like for a man or a woman. Like everything that's on your rack downstairs, at least what I've seen in the Electric Church, is just simply fashion and simply stylish and simply just designed to be put on a body. And I'm wondering if there's intentionality around that. Do you have to navigate that when you partner with Fred Perry? And you know, are you saying to these people that you partner with, well, our clothes are intentionally ungendered or non-binary? Is that a navigation? Because we know like this fashion world as it is incredibly racist and incredibly sexist. So I wanted to hear about maybe some of those experiences and those challenges that you may have navigated.
I think the funny thing is, when we started the whole clothing line thing, we never really looked at it as a thing we're doing for one kind of people or a person. I remember still draping my first skirt. I was wearing baggy jeans, listening to probably MOP on my little room, like a little box room I had. And I didn't have a mannequin by then, so I couldn't drape it on a mannequin. So I had to drape that thing on myself. And imagine in that era how that I felt, like while you listen to like hardcore hip hop, all those stuff. I had to take off my baggy jeans and put on a drapey skirt on top, which I had to finish for a client to deliver next day. And for most of my friends, it was like, what are you doing? But when this dude came, it's just like, oh, are you ready to finish that so we can go to the club or go to buy records? You know, so for him, it was just like, that's the job you're doing, you know. But also like, we don't look at everything as this is for men and women or Sam and Shaka. In fact, this season we made it much more clearer because also we don't really like labels. That whole sort of, oh, it's menswear, it's women's wear, it's non-binary, it's this and that. So the idea was that we created a label where it said humans wear. So the idea was like this piece of cloth, it will dress a human, whichever style you're into, and you'll be able to exercise that on any sort of occasion. So when we do the collaboration with people such as Couples or Fred Perry, we already have that direction ahead that we're not going to shoot this collection on a man or women. We're going to just shoot this collection on a person. But we always made sure that we have a mix of people or race or age. So if you look at all the lookbook, you see a female friend, male model or young model. Also, because we spend our lives surrounded around our female friends or moms and sisters, and we tend to sometimes, especially me growing up, like when I reach like 10 or 12, I start looking at my sister's wardrobe. I'm like, this is fly, I'll wear it. And as soon as I wear it, they're looking at me like, you were so different. Like, that was mine. Before even they get mad at me, they look at the style, they'll be like, I never thought about wearing it that way. I mean, it's just normal in our head. Obviously, it's people are looking at it differently, especially because we have to show our clothing during Men's Fashion Week, and you have to tell them, like, I know it's Men's Week, but you can also buy it for women. But I think it's really mostly what we exercise, what we show in social media, what we show in our lookbooks, what we have between our friends. I mean, we dress from, I can't remember now, but from Anderson .Paak to Erykah Badu with the same piece. You know, so it's really not about labeling and directing in a different way. It's really about making people decide for themselves. And that helped us a lot. I have to say, like, our followers helped us a lot in terms of, like, wearing those pieces and making it something else. If you realize in our social media, every Sunday, we post about people from different places wearing our stuff. Sunday best, you always see a mix of gender, age, and race. So I think these big industries, if you tell them, it feels like you are now really going to get to them, you have to show them. So I think Shaka mentioned in another conversation we was having, the thing we like about these collaborations because we can decide the full creative control. So not being able to stop our ideas. So ideas have to start from the beginning to the end.
I mean, to add on, I remember when we did our first collections, we never showed our faces, and people thought we were Japanese just because of this, the silhouette and the color palette we used. And what it dawned on me, like most of the time, people, and same people did not want to work with us because they felt, oh, if you're African and have African heritage, you should be making, you're from Ghana, you should be using the kente clothing, you should be using this fabric and so on and so forth. But Africa is not just one fabric. There's textures, we as black people, for instance, we have so many inspirations that we soak up to. So I think when we travel, and sometimes I'm in Paris, they think I'm from New York. I come to New York, they think I'm Parisian. Some people think I'm from Philly, Jamaica. And I begin to realize what was happening was because the inspiration we've been absorbing over the years was because I grew up in West London, and it's a mix of culture. Like we had the Portuguese, the Japanese, we had English, everyone from everywhere. Before I went to Japan, I knew so much about Japan just because my neighbors were Japanese. So we've soaked up this inspiration, and we put it back into our clothing. And so when people tend to see this, they resonate, because the people that see me and think I'm from Jamaica, for instance, it's not because I'm from Jamaica. Maybe they recognize the color palette that they grew up with, and they're like, oh, you might be Jamaican because you're wearing these colors, or you might be Nigerian because you behave this way, and so on and so forth. But the inspiration has been endless, and so we put that back in. So again, it's a conscious decision to make sure we represent ourselves and make sure our message is not refined to just one thing.
Jason, I want to ask you about intentionality in the characters that you develop for your novels, and how important fashion is to these identities that you create?
I remember I was writing Miles Morales, right? And there's a part in that book where he's with his best. Does everybody know Miles Morales? Spider-Man. So Black Spider-Man. Shout out to Black Spider-Man. Shout out to the fact that there's a Black Spider-Man.
Yes.
And so when I'm writing the book, there's a part where he's with his homeboy. They're on the basketball court, and his homeboy has on Air Max infrareds, right? Now, this shoe, and if you're a sneakerhead, you know what the shoe is, right? The Air Max infrared was such a big deal in the 90s. And I think they come back out since then, of course. But I remember, so I write it into the book very specifically. Like I named the sneaker, right? The Air Max infrared. And when the book came out and it's doing this, that, and the third, I remember people coming up to me and being like, yo, you put the infrareds in the book. And we started to have conversations around how in certain black communities, so many black communities, sneakers are sort of, they become your force field, right? What fashion serves as in black communities, especially when it comes to black men, is like, yo, sometimes this is the only shield that I have. It's the reason why so many, look, you could look at like, and so that's what you see in the book, right? You see sort of me writing fashion as a way to sort of talk about how young people use clothing as ways to mask insecurity, use clothing to sort of figure out a way to proliferate safety, right? Which is what it is sometimes. It's like, look, if I got these on, maybe they won't joke me. At the same time, if I got these on, maybe they're gonna get me, right? This constant sort of conundrum of what does it mean to be intentional about the way that you look when you step out the house into your neighborhood and your community and the communities around you, and how we use those things as either magnets or repellents for all sorts of reasons. And that's what it looks like in most of my novels. And it's something that I think about all the time. I mean, I remember like when I was a kid, my mom, so like, there's that moment where you're like, yo, I just want I grew up in like the 90s, so it's like, yo, Nautica, Tommy, give me like Polo, right? Give me like these are the three things that I want. My mother's like, nah, like I'm just not spending that kind of bread on somebody else's logo, right? She was like, but what I will do is I will buy you these clothes on an off season when they don't cost no money, right? So in the summer, so all the parents in the room, so the secret is when, you know what I'm saying? When it's the winter time, you want to buy all of last summer's clothes, right? Whatever's left, you want to get those clothes on like the 75%, right? And so my mom would buy all these clothes on the off season. So you got this kid, I'm like in the house, it's 100 degrees outside, and I'm trying on my Eddie Bauer bed, because I'm like, hey, yo, this is it, right? And it's like, yo, it's 100 degrees, right? And you think about what that means, right? Why those clothes sometimes. I had a homie, and I'll end here. I had a friend who had a doctorate degree in philosophy, and part of her work was she was doing the philosophy of slavery. And in her study, she was talking about how because black people have been stripped of all agency, right? Stripped of name, stripped of identity, religion, culture, stripped of family, stripped of all agency, that the moment that they were free, the only thing that they actually had control over was their bodies. It's all I got. This is it. Everything else about me has been washed. The only thing I have is this body. It informs and because all I have is this body, it informs the way I walk. It informs the way I look. It informs why I fight for the master's clothes. It informs everything. Like you talk about self-determination. When we think of that word colloquially, we think of persistence. That's not what it means, right? It just means the idea of determining oneself. And the moment I have the opportunity to determine myself, the only self I actually have left is this physical thing, this body. And I'm gonna do whatever I can to assault every space I'm in with the only weapon I actually still possess. And that is my body, right? And that is the reason why I think so many of us use fashion and weaponize fashion the way that we do.
Something that you mentioned, Shaka, and I think it kind of came up before. We're talking about the regionality of fashion, and I didn't grow up in DC, but I know DC had a very specific fashion expression, a fashion language. I know parasucos were a big thing. They didn't wear kazals. What were the other glasses that they wore? yeah, I forgot the name of it, but like, it kind of looked like us all, but they were different.
We wore slouch
and-
socks. We wore, which we always saw as, we love them as like our socks. But you go out of town, they're like, yo, I got on cheerleader socks. Those girl socks. And we like, nah, bro, these slouch socks. These are drop socks. We had local brands, Hobo, Madness, right? We had all these, like DC was self-determined, right? The DC fashion history is a self-determined history, right? Everything was ours, except for Sabiato. I don't know why we was wearing that. That ain't ours. Everything else was ours, in a very real way. That'd be some interesting shit for y'all to look up. Like DC fashion history is very different than almost everywhere else because everything was self-determined.
And when you mentioned, like, the difference, like you were on a single island, you were on Manhattan, and your experience, uptown in Harlem, and then you go down to Soho, and, almost the same exact geography and your space and how it's embraced. And I think, the important conversation is like, now, how does masculinity fit in a global sense? Because this idea, this construct of masculinity is certainly different in different spaces. And a move towards a more global position certainly does not take in consideration like what it means to be, anything else but in Southeast, anything else but like, being up here in Northwest, and that, and that through that global perspective. So I'm really interested in like hearing how like your global perspective, Tokyo, Jamaica, like how that has informed, because you said you pick up some of those things as you go along and then they become a part of your practice and your expression. Are there particular moments in that where you feel like that translation may have failed and audience may not have responded to something that you've done, and it could be completely related to geography?
Oh yeah, that all the time. I mean, we sorry to put it this way, we're not science, but we consider ourselves mad science because we try everything on ourselves before trying any other place, and sometimes we try for quite a while. One, because of the quality, obviously quality control have to go through us. Two, because of obviously the self-determination we're talking about, but also the black gypsiness of our style. I think it's quite interesting. You actually mentioning that one of the simple example, like, so our collection tend to have these, even if the themes are different and sometimes the color palettes change, you can always speak, because that's another thing we find quite stupid about fashion. All the season changing, and like you mentioned before, like moms used to go at outlet and buy that. We all did that. We're still doing it, which I think this is the way to go, because you can't be going buying all these expensive jackets like San Loca's gonna make another one next season. You can just look like, But we created a collection where the pieces are still making sense to fall in collection. So by the time you put them together, it's just really dope styling. Like, so nothing to do like, oh, this is so last season, this is so new season. But also one of the reasons we do that, because it always happens that when you release something new, it won't work for like the first year or the second year, and it works the third year. Maybe because people are not ready for some flare trousers. People still want to do the skinny or the straight leg. But for us, it's like, this I feel comfortable with. I want to push it until people get it. But if they don't get it, as long as the silhouette still tell the story, I'm going to keep on doing it. But failure is inevitable. It's inevitable. And I think that's kind of what teaches us also, like, to really stay consistent in what we do. One of the main things, I think, when it comes to like different countries picking up styles, like we tend to get quite a lot of what traditionally those countries had. Sometimes it's not even something relevant they have now. If you check like one of the trench coats we have downstairs, it says in the spine, trench town rockers. I always love the fact that I love playing with words. Maybe that's the MC side on me. But I love the part where you can pick one thing and say something else. Obviously, we were playing with the word trench coat, but then we just thought about trench town rockers. Bob Marley album cover, he was wearing this beautiful trench, and we decided to apply it to our collection. But not everyone is going to relate to that. And sometimes people realize that much later, oh, that trench coat, and it was written that, and it's rockers. So it's really there for open interpretation. But yeah, I don't expect them to get astray. Like, it's not big of a deal. I just love experimenting, and also, as we said before, we love the fact that people actually don't like what we do in the beginning, because that's what pushed us to do what we do. So main thing was like, oh, they didn't like it, great. Meaning we're still very individual.
I think the narrative needs to change, and the definitions because again, who's to say what's trending, what's not trending? It's the media, and it's the power that be. But the truth is, the people control this. Like the media goes to the streets, like back in the days when we were in East London, like Shoreditch or Spitalfield. The media will come and watch everyone on the street, copy, go to the lab, package it, and sell it back expensively to the same people on the streets. So again, it's like, and we on the streets, or people on the streets, we just dress because we want to look good, and it's not defined by anything else. We just want to look good, but we inspire these houses. So I think it's time that we change the narrative. And so it's like you said, of course, in Japan, black culture always sells anyway, right? Always sells. So the Japanese always gets it, but in different collections, some are popular, some are not popular. It could be because of sizes. Like few of our collections, when we sell in US in the beginning, because of the sizes, it didn't do very well because everyone was into their baggy clothes. Mm-hmm. However, it's selling well now. So if we wanted to be commercial, we could have made stuff for them. But like, I think over the years, they've taken time to change or begin to appreciate styles, and more people are open. I think the information age, the social media, people are beginning to decide for themselves. They're no longer just relying on GQ to tell them what's hot and what's not hot. Mm-hmm. They can just go on Instagram, check out their friends, check out someone in China, check out someone in Japan, and be like, you know what, I like what this person did, but I'm from DC, so I'm going to flip it this way, this color. I'm going to add this bit, and I'm going to create my own silhouette or whatever. So we're beginning to change all this, and I think that's what needs to happen in the industry.
Because clearly there's a timelessness to your practice and to your collections, and I think of it in a very artful way. And, you know, I think when you create, you know, such an enduring statement, you know, it's way more complicated. I know, like, when the conversation on Tuesday night, someone mentioned the idea of like fads and like things coming and peaking and going. But, you know, I mean, it's clear that you all have created a whole new language, and I think that there were so many communities within black communities, because I want to make sure that we understand that there are communities within black communities, instead of always saying, like, you know, blacks are this and that, who really looked and responded to you all as a nuanced space and a whole completely new language and territory and fashion. You know, because, you know, as a gay man, like, who certainly felt self-determined, I didn't want to come out from, you know, a heteronormative existence and practice to go into a homonormative. You know, like, I don't want to wear the gay uniform either. You know, I just wanted to wear things that I felt good in. And, you know, and like not have that part of the identity, that part, the gayness, the blackness, the anything, like, you know, coming from South Carolina to inform like how I wanted to be comfortable in the space right now. And those communities, and I think that's a part of what has been so incredibly successful with your work. It's like, you know, you didn't just build clothes, you built communities, you know, around aesthetics, you know, and I think that, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, the jean, the stovepipe, the straight leg, the flare. It's an aesthetic, you know, it's in a practice, and it seems to be deeply steeped in like self-determination with like some framework about like just wearing what's comfortable. So that timelessness certainly brings all kinds of, you know, potential failures and mishaps and misses based on that. And I think I certainly want to say you appreciate that bravery. Jason, just, you know, to get back to you and your practice, and, you know, even though, you know, as a novelist, it's not what you are focused on now as a creator, or how you're contributing to this world, but it is clearly about it, because again, it's an aesthetic, you know. I think that people recognize Jason Reynolds not just by his writing, but like by his presence. And I think that's a very, somebody affirm that, I saw that over there, yeah. And I think like what really is at the core of it, and things that we can certainly say right now, that these are three beautiful black men, and a part of that beauty is certainly that self-determination that comes through. And it's not a sexual designation per se. And I think that black men in beauty have not been, they've had a very acrimonious relationship historically, globally. And black men who are like now accepting and embracing their beauty and sharing it with the world on a democratic global platform that allows us to have that conversation with the world without having to go through the marginalizing process of looking at white supremacist infrastructure in fashion, in publication, to embrace and announce our own beauty. And I think that that's an appreciation that the world owes to all of you for putting that out in that space. So as we wrap up, before we go to our last question, before we go to our questions, I would love for, if there's anything else that hasn't been covered that, the three of you would like to share with the audience in that way, and then we'll open it up for audience discussion.
I mean, I think ultimately there's just so much power in honesty and authenticity in every part of our lives. And I think that's the hardest thing to do, is to just be honest about who you are, what you love, who you love, what you like, what you're trying to try. Like all these things I think we struggle with. And I think it would just behoove us, and it'd be super liberating for everyone to try to be as honest as possible, even in terms of how they express themselves in this way. I go to schools all the time, and I work, I show up to schools, and they're always young people, because by the way, your kids are watching, right? That's the other thing, like the children are watching. And so when I show up to a school, what used to happen back in the day when I first was getting started, is that kids would always say like, yo, we didn't think you was gonna look like that. Because I show up in, like I always dress, right? T-shirt, jeans, tattoos, all of which is a part of the way, like, including the clothes we can't take off, right? Like our tattoos, like the fact, I grew a beard because my daddy had one. And for me, it was like, that's what I'm supposed to, like, that feels right to me. I don't know. Then I grew it and was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's me, right? Like all these things are a part of, everything is a part of it all. And the kids always say like, I didn't think it was gonna look like that. I thought you was gonna have on a suit, right? And there's nothing wrong with the suit if I feel like it. But if I don't feel like it, right? Then I ain't gonna, it is what it is. And for them to see that, and they'd be like, oh yeah, you could do that. You could do whatever you want, right? You can do whatever you want. It doesn't mean that we don't teach all the other things about, like, if you got a job, there's rules, right? I get all of that, but I think we teach that. I teach that after you teach freedom.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I think I'll add on by saying you can't please everyone. Like, so we never try to design for everybody, like, because the core audience we have has sustained us till now, and we continue to grow just by being ourselves. And people who are being themselves, even when they're not into fashion, resonate and join the collective. To add on to your beard story, it's like when we started growing our beard, was just we became hardcore punks, like straight edge punks. So we wanted to be vegans and straight edge and no alcohol, no drugs, whatever. In fashion, that's something that's rare. And secondly, just the beard, my mom was crying. She's like, you can't travel anywhere because they're gonna think you're a terrorist. No woman is gonna want you. And I don't know how long ago. Now, if you look around, the so-called hipsters all have beard. So it's really just being yourself.
I think I would like to leave you guys with few ideas of like how we created our collective and our clothing. I think the interesting thing about fashion for us, it wasn't really about fashion. It was really, is what Sheldon was saying before, is about self-determination, but also self-representation. We were trying to look around on anything culturally in the world where there wasn't a black person. And if there wasn't a black person, we will research about it and trying to find out that black person and be like, why we're not listening to heavy metal? Why we're not wearing cowboy hats or cowboy boots? Why we're not, anything you can think about, like why we're not thinking about Afrofuturism even before George Clinton, why we're not thinking about all this? We've been there and we are there. So the idea was that we'll take the fashion as a process to do that research and be able to share with our community, but also be able to learn. That's the reason we love the process so much than the finished product, because that's kind of where we find ourselves being very comfortable and very proud. So I think thank you for the rest of us which are doing it through literature or through culture or through Weaponizer. That's a joke.
Terrible thing to say about
that's a joke. But yeah, no, thank you for being able to represent all of us in many different genres. I know, right? I had to do it.
You gonna pay for that?
He didn't do his famous intro. He normally says he's one of the best half. Anyway, no, but seriously, on a serious note, I think it's quite beautiful to see how we can embrace everything now. Like, I be fan of like the Parliament, Funkadelic for ages, but I never really look at it as Afrofuturism, as I thought George Clinton was dope to be able to represent that side of a black man, sound right, all these people. So let's not make our culture trendy, but let's focus on every single part of us as being, like we are it, and we've been there, we are still there. So it's good to research, to dig deeper, to find out about those things. So I'm really honored to be here and meet Jason and finding out about all the great stories you've been writing. And we found out to have actually a girlfriend in common, Curtis, which is another thing I was thinking, like if it wasn't because of the music, fashion, literature, we'll never meet, all of us. So I think it's great that we have that as people to bring us together.
Awesome. Carlos, I'm going to ask you to help us with questions. If you don't mind, thank you. Carlos and Deirdre are part of the Eaton team and have been very supportive in helping us with these events. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, speaking into the mic, only because we're recording. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to DC. Jason, you're already here. I'm Nasozi. I'm a longtime fan. I work with many textiles, primarily West African and East African fair trade goods, and I also am inspired by a global, I guess, swath of textiles and traditions in informing my home decor collection. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned your father is a tailor, and I'm half Ugandan, so I have a foot in both worlds, the African world and the American world, and there are certain professions, traditions, and other things that are completely normal and not considered feminine or homosexual there, tailor being one of them. So how did you growing up outside of Africa, but still, being raised in an African family and having a foot in that world as well, reconcile some of those discrepancies between how some things that are very normal to us in one place are very alien and foreign in the place where you're growing up and cultivating your craft?
Interesting question. Hello. It was very interesting. I think one thing I learned from my family, obviously growing up as an African man in the African family, but in Europe, it was the discipline. It was everything. Even just the way we all looked before we came out of home, it was very, very important. My father taught me that my way of looking, I was representing the family, away from the family. But I didn't go on the rebellions and we practiced. It was key to be able to learn from other cultures also. So I think we tend to bring a lot of things home. Our parents weren't really aware. The funny story was the first time I showed my father, because by then I think I left London and I was based in Stockholm. And the first time I saw my father, a piece of clothing I made. It was a tweed jacket, obviously, because I love the English fabric. It was tweed jacket, but based on like a military, I think it was an MS-65 or something. And coming from Angola, army clothing is not a good thing. So my father, being a tailor, he looked at it, he's like, why are you always using military clothing? And I'm thinking, Dad, I'm using tweed. Like, check the fabric. This is a Scottish fabric, you know. This is a fabric for this weather. Like, but my dad was just paying attention to the cat, that it was so military. And for us, obviously, we have a lot of war history. For my father, it was different language. But then that's when I realized anything we're putting our hands and our sweat and our ideas on, it was telling different stories to different people. So for my father, it was a straight war. But for a Scottish man, it was like, oh, this is great. And for London kid, it was like, this is so mud. And for Swedish kid, it was like, this is perfect for my snow weather, you know? So I realized I'm gonna leave these as open for information and for interpretation. But it wasn't until my family, they started understanding that we weren't doing it just for us. It was a worldwide thing. So my dad was like, okay, I'll pass you my skills, but it wasn't for you just to make suits. It's for you to reinterpret everything from the music you listen to, from the books you collecting, for the people you're hanging out with, and for the subculture you are into. So I think he only realized that when I actually took a picture of him and they put it in a magazine and I dressed him as a blues musician. I looked at himself, he's like, is that me? I was like, yeah, that's you. And I love that picture so much that I ended up tattooing on my side. I was like, yeah, my dad looks like a blues player. Yeah, but yeah, it's funny. Like, even though they get it, but they don't really get it, because my mom's still asking me, like, my mom thinks I'm still in Turkey, because that's where we have the factory. Obviously, because I haven't called her for a month, but she thinks like we just go one place and stay. So by the time I go back, I'll be like, oh, Mom, we've been in three states in America? And she'd be like, what were you doing there, you know? And it's interesting, because she asks those questions, but she's so proud inside thinking, oh, my son is traveling through just using his hand. Yeah, but yeah, we love our African family.
I think it's hard because there's a generation gap, and then my parents still don't get it. Like, my dad can't believe anyone buys my clothes. It's like, who buys your clothes, and who do you sell it to, and how did you do it? And my mom, yeah. But my mom's like, I don't know who buys your clothes. And then Christmas, she'd be like, could you sew me something? I'm like, I thought I don't know. You know, but I think it's just a generation gap. It's like, obviously they care, so they just want to make sure you're able to pay your rent, feed yourself, and so on and so forth. And they don't have to worry, because they know, I mean, I'm skinny, but they know I eat well. And they know I pay my rent. But speaking of just the generation gap, is the same thing. It's like I got my nieces and nephews who are very young, and they speak a whole different language. So obviously I was trying to impress them. They live in Canada, and I brought a magazine. We were in the front page, and I showed it to them. And the first thing they tried to do was flip on the magazine, because they thought it was an iPad. You know, so so for them, the book is just irrelevant to them. It's a whole different thing. And I realized, okay, if I want to impress them, what I need to do is speak their language. So next time I'm like, come here, check out the phone, see your uncle shining, and then then they get it. Same as my parents. It's like, obviously they still don't get it because it's two different generations. But when they see people my mom would meet people on the street and be like, oh yeah, your son inspires me, and she'd be like, who? So yeah, I think you can't, as I say, you can't please everyone. It's really just carrying on doing what you're doing, and it's either you bridge the gap or the differences between understanding of what you do.
And it goes the same. I mean, I'm somebody who is a Black American, specifically a Black American. It's the same. Like, our mothers, unless you grew up with an artist as a parent, or unless you grew up affluent, this is a shot in the dark. My mom is like this. Like, how do you deal with the dissonance of knowing your child wants to do something that feels so far beyond what your own opportunities were, right? And so my mom worked the same job 40 years, retired, and then took another job as a teacher for 15 years, which is where she is now, 74 years old, right? So for her, it's like you get a job, you work, you 401 it, you insurance it, you get you create safety, because at any given time, your life can become unsafe, right? And then you say, I'm trying to be a writer. I'm trying to be I'm working furniture, right? Your mother's like, that's just not what we do, right? I remember the first time that I was in the newspaper or in a magazine or something like that, and my mother's telling me that it's so strange to see one of her child in a public editorial, because that's not something you ever think about someone in your family doing, right? And when she says that's not something you think about someone in your family, she's talking about like a whole swath of black people. She's talking about like the black collective. She like most of us don't ever imagine somebody in our household being on the television screen. Like that's far from her reality. And so my best friend, my ace in the hole, he taught me a lot, because I would be angry because my mother, I felt like she didn't believe in me. And he would always say, you shouldn't expect her to understand. Right? You should extend grace and patience to it, because for her, this is uncharted territory. Then I have a little brother who's 18. He wants to be a musician, and he has not a care in the world because he watched his big brother already do. Right? So now the family trajectory shifts. You know.
Yeah.
Definitely extending grace and would you say understanding. When I told my mom I was making art, and I told her my art had been collected in the African American History and Culture Museum. And she said, oh yeah, can you send me one of the photographs? I want to get it laminated.
It's real.
And I just said, yeah, no, you can't laminate that one. But it was honest. Maybe got time for a couple more questions? Okay.
So I know you all said that, children are looking. I brought my daughter here for a reason. And I know through your novels, you inspire youth, and through your work and your fashion, you all inspire youth. So now when we get to the form of, self-determination and originality, when these schools are really indoctrinating, conformity, what would you say to our youth?
What was the last part?
What would you say to our youth?
Well, I tell you, what I say often to our youth is, number one, the greatest gift you could give yourself is yourself, first and foremost, right? Which means who you are right now is enough. Who you are this moment, right? No matter what they say, no matter what you hear, no matter what your teacher's talking about, who you know you to be is who you are, not who they project you to be, who you know you to be, right? When we talk about self-determination. Number two, everything that makes them mad about you are the very things that make you magic, right? Never forget it. It's what y'all have been talking about this whole time, right? Art comes first. The other thing about ACF is artists can't fear. He didn't say it, I didn't say that, but I know that's another one of y'all monikers, right? Artists can't fear, right? This idea, everything that makes them mad about you, including your peers, when they teasing you, let them tease you, and if you don't bend, they'll copy you. Right? They'll copy. Everything that makes them mad are the very things that make you magic. I was talking to my buddy Jason today. We were talking about this idea where everybody always says, what would you tell your 16-year-old self, your 10-year-old self, your 15-year-old self? And it's always this I would tell them, hang in there, just be, it's okay, it gets better, right? And the truth is what we should be telling, for me, and what I want our young people like yourself to say, when you're my age and you look back, I want you to say, if I could tell my 10-year-old self something, it would be thank you. Because it's the 10-year-old self that got it right. And now we're holding on for dear life to our 10-year-old selves, trying to figure out how to manage our imaginations, how to hold on to our courage, how to figure out how to walk the balance between irreverence and irresponsibility, all the things that 10-year-olds understand fully, because that is literally what their lives are. Right? And so hold on to that part of yourself, and by the time you're old like the rest of us, you'll realize it's your 10-year-old self that's going to save your life every day. Shout out to the babies.
One more question?
So I guess culture vultures run rampant, and it's very known that people steal from the black community in terms of sound and in clothes and stuff. So as an artist and designer and writer, could you describe the process or advice for taking flavors from other cultures properly and adding your own flavor to it without misrepresenting where it comes from?
I just wanted to add something before we answer you. to the kids here. One of our favorite quotes we have printed in our studio in London, it says, creative adult is a child who survive. So I believe we all still very much that child who at school being bullied or not feeling fit in, because that's what made us creative. So let's keep that child alive. In terms of you, bro, there's two terms we use when it comes to culture. It's quite a sensitive one, actually, and I like the fact it was you asking that. There's culture appropriation and culture appreciation. Culture appreciation, that's what made us Black Gypsies. Because we don't claim any culture. We are part of every culture. That's the reason I said in the beginning when I came here, I was like, we're based in London and Paris, but while I'm here, I'm from DC, I'm based here now. So I'm trying to fit into everywhere we go to make sure that I respect the culture and I learn from them. By the time I leave here, I have a bit of DC on me, which I can mix a bit of Paris in me, and I can mix a bit of London in me. All that together, that will make me who I am. The funny thing is, actually Shaka didn't say the story, but he's the one who always tells the story. Every single country we go, someone else sees someone else on us. I remember once in London, just walking in the street looking for stuff at flea market, a guy came, he saw we were his cousin from Jamaica. You look like my cousin in the backyard. You look like my cousin in the backyard. Went to Nigeria, someone saw it, they saw us be Fela Kuti. So even, I swear, even in Mexico, where you think people don't look, they'll be like, charo, negro. So you get to feel like you're part of everywhere, and you really feel comfortable with the culture. When you are among people, really feel like you are those people. I never felt any difference when I'm hanging out with people from different race, or people from different gender, or people from different style. These are two African kids who grew up in London hanging out with skinheads. While you think, oh, skinheads are racist. Skinheads are not racist. They listen to reggae, they listen to ska. They must have some Black influence on it. More, they listen to Northern Soul. But at the same time, it's important to respect first the culture and knowing where you're crossing the boundary or not. That's the reason it's always good, like, to have friends who they can also check you, or you can check with them, be like, is this correct? Is this okay? It's really important, because you don't want to be a culture jacker, because that's no good. And at the same time, like, culture is the only thing we have. That's what get us really sitting here, be able to share these lovely stories. So yeah, thank you for asking that.
Yeah, just to add on a business level, or even from a design perspective, like when we work on projects and we say like we're going to Jamaica, so it's really about respecting the cultures. Like, of course, I'm not Jamaican. Like, my mom's from Grenada, so they're very similar, but I'm not Jamaican, so I don't want to come to Jamaica and scream like I'm Bob Marley and take and leave, right? So what we tend to do is when we go out there to shoot a campaign, we make sure we're using the local talent, right? We make sure we scout or look for people from that environment, and we can all team up, and we learn a lot. We learn from them, and we make sure they get paid, so it doesn't feel like you're just going into a place and just taking the beautiful side of it, commercializing it, and just leaving. So that's the way we've managed to up onto today, just go to places. Like when we're in Mexico, we work with the Mexicans. We learn, know how far we can express or not cross the lines, and so on and so forth.
I don't know nothing about that, bro.
Okay.
That's outside of my wheelhouse.
All
But I will say really quickly, because the first thing you said was Black people had their stuff stolen, like, you know, this idea, and it's true, by the way, like, all our stuff gets stolen, right? But the other thing I want to make sure, the other side of that coin, which is like because of all of our stuff gets stolen, a lot of Black people be scared to make stuff. It's a lot of, I meet all these teenagers who are like, I got an idea, but I can't tell you because you might, right? It's this idea, everybody is, so nobody trusts, no artist trusts anybody anymore, right? And what I say to those people is, if you claim to be an artist, you better have more than one good one.
Exactly.
Things happen. You're going to get bit. You better have something else. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Okay. Is that it? No more questions, or? Okay. You can sit down. We got one. Okay. We got one question in the back, and then.
Hi,
maybe one here.
hello. Thank you guys for showing up. I have been obsessed with you for years, and wanted that hat with the feather for years. Anyway, yeah, thank you. Art comes first. Who would be your ideal client, or the person, who's the persona who would wear your clothes and best exemplify that? And then, not to be negative, because you are out there and you are a purveyor of style and fashion, anyone can buy it. It's gonna sound like a weird question. Who would you not want representing your logo, your style, your clothing? Who would you not want to wear it?
Can I say Trump?
You're in DC, you better say Trump. This is true, yeah.
They might not let me out, but I'll say Trump.
I mean, to be honest with you, we've, like, the whole idea of art comes first is beyond the clothing line. It's also for what it stands for. So over the journey of our trips, I bump into people like architects who'll be like, listen, I'm not into fashion, but I saw someone wearing a jacket that said art comes first, and I've been struggling in my profession, in making decisions. And when I saw that, it resonated with me. I've seen doctors, and even the talk we had here a couple of days ago, a professor from Harvard came. And so again, it's beyond the clothing itself, is the message. And I think even if you're in the creative world, or you're a scientist, or you're a doctor, or mathematician, it's really about putting what it's in here first, which is your art. And when I say art, not just creativity, but like what you stand for first.
Tweet about
If
it.
Trump, it wouldn't fit him anyway, so.
No.
He would need that hat, though. That hair. Good question. I think he wouldn't fit.
No, just no. We ain't gonna end on that either. I need another question, so we can walk out here with that more firm thing, because that name can't linger in this room. Anybody got another question or comment?
Say night.
All right.
Hey, what's good? Yo, so how do y'all like engage the community?
Sorry, how do we engage the community?
Yeah.
By activities like this. We've been on the road for the past 6 weeks. So it's beautiful, but it's also tough. But the only way to grow the community is to engage them. And of course, the online is beautiful. Like people get to see us on Instagram, but we're old school and we're analog. And I believe in this. And I think when people come and they see the pop-up and we have talks like this, it's a whole different connection that you can never really get from the Instagram or the digital platforms. So that's why we do pop-ups, and that's why we travel, because we really want to connect with people. And the connection is deeper than the internet connection.
I think we engage with the community through what we call electric church. We have a lot of connection through energies. And I think, as Shaka mentioned before, like our brand is far from the clothing. It's really that communication can be a simple. I have a friend in Canada. She always says, she's like, every time you post something on social media, I feel like you're talking to the rest of us. But the funny thing is that I use a lot of our skills of what she sends me as a piece of research. And I think everything we do, conscious and unconscious, we're talking to each other. We all do it, all the time. Jason does that through his writing, and I had the honor to meet him because of this talk, but I know there's much more I'm going to learn through his work. Sheldon, we knew each other since May. I already learned a lot through his work. Like, even before I meet a person, before this talk, I already felt the energy because I know we were coming here for this. So engagement with the community is 24/7. It's no something we can really put a finger on it. It's 24/7. At least as far as we're concerned, we get inspired by you guys all the time. It's a 24/7 thing. So there's no, someone asked me before, don't you get a creative block? I can't get creative block as long as I still have the community out there shining, you know.
And in as much as the digital age is still here and it's very important, we need to make sure we don't neglect our human senses. Like, make sure you feel, you touch, you listen, you smell, and that's very key. So that's why this type of community is very important for us. I mean, you when I met you, you just said to me we had someone in common, and you're a big fan of horror, for instance, right? So we're already connected through them. You understand? So it's a community. Everyone that's here today is connected somehow, somewhere, and this is what builds the community. So thanks for everyone for coming.
I just think my only note is that, like, I think there's active engagement, which is what this is, and I think there's passive engagement, which most people think is oxymoronic, but it's not. Right? There is a passive engagement, and I think what passive engagement looks like in our everyday lives, bro. If this is about men and race and fashion and masculinity, so forth and so on. You see your partner on the street, tell him he look good, tell him he fly. Like, and that's engagement. Women do this. Yo, I watch my mama. Everybody, all the women in my life, be like, "Girl, you looking like," right? And what it does, and what it's doing is it's injecting fortitude into spaces that might be struggling, right? And so when we talk about passive, that is still active engagement. Like, men really got to be okay with looking another man in the face and being like, "Hey, bro, you killing today's your day, champ. You killing him." Right? And not feeling no way about it, and then moving on about your day without feeling all like, oh, it's like, nah, this your day, champ, you killing it, and keep it moving. And we'd be surprised what that does, what kind of engagement, like what that actually does for us.
It's a very important point, and to like counter that stickiness we had earlier, there's a really funny clip of Barack Obama talking to an audience in the White House, which was largely black, and he said, "Every time Michelle come up here, I can't even talk. All I hear is, 'Hey, Michelle, girl, you look good. You look good.'" And he's like, "Y'all don't never say that to me when I walk around." Nobody say, "Ooh, Barack, you look good today. I like that suit." And I think that's just, and that's such an important point. I think it's a really good point to end on. It's like the things that we were talking about, self-determination certainly would be a big one. In a self-determined space, you feel more empowered to share with the rest of the world and everyone else how their self-determination is detected. And if we can break that of the complication of race and gender, we'll find out that this idea of community is stronger, more beautiful, and more connected than we could ever imagine. And the whole reason of having Sam and Shaka here was just an opportunity to really say that, hey, there is a community here in Washington, D.C. That loves and supports. And we would love to be in audience with you and be in conversation. And hopefully, like Lisa, what I've seen already so far since you guys have been here is like you have really built a home here in D.C. And I hope that you all feel that way and feel welcome here at any time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Electric Church is open downstairs for another hour. Please go down there and look at all the beautiful things. Spend some time down there. I want to thank again, Deirdre and Carlos and all of the Eaton staff. Please thank them for helping us setting this up this day. Thank you guys and have a good night.